Trina. Hey, girl. Hey. There we go. All right. Pull my bricks out of here. All right, y'all. Happy Sunday. Left 60. All right, beautiful people. Happy Sunday. I should get it, but I'm not. It is September the 5th, 2021, day 252 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets. Another 3-year consecutive day count, 921. Guys, we are reading Amos 5, 6, and 7. And then we're going to pick up where we left off at yesterday, starting chapter 4 on page 69 in Caesar's Messiah. Tiffany, hey girl, hey, Shayla, that's Wild Blue, Levon, blessings. All right, y'all. So let's get right to it. Okay. Start this off with the Shema. Remember, the Shema is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And we start at verse 3. Remember, read the whole thing. Read the whole chapter. The whole chapter is the full Shema, right? I just kind of summed up the meat and potatoes of the chapter because it ain't that long. It's only 27 verses, but you get my drift. Here. Therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahuwah, the mighty one of our fathers, has promised us in a land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, our mighty one, he is one. And you shall love Yahuwah, your mighty one, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuwah, our mighty one, for our good, always, that he might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah, our mighty one, as he has commanded us. Christy, hey girl, hey. Trina, hey gang girl, came up on YouTube. All right, so let's pull up Amos real quick. A call, excuse me. So I have frog in my throat. A call to repentance. All right. Listen, you people of Israel. Listen to this funeral song I am singing. The virgin Israel has fallen, never to rise again. She lies abandoned on the ground with no one to help her up. The sovereign Lord says, when a city sends 1,000 men to battle, only 100 will return. When a town sends 100, only 10 will come back alive. Now this is what Yahuwah says to the family of Israel. Come back to me and live. Don't worship at the pagan altars at Bethel. Don't go to the shriners at Gilgal or Beersheba, for the people of Gilgal will be dragged off into exile, and the people of Bethel will be reduced to nothing. Come back to Yahuwah and live. Otherwise, he will roar through Israel like a fire, devouring you completely. Your gods in Bethel won't be able to quench the flames. You twist justice, making it a bitter pill for the oppressed. You treat the righteous like dirt. It is Yahuwah who created the stars, the Pleiades, and Orion. He turns darkness into morning and day into night. He draws up water from the oceans and pours it down as rain on the land. Yahuwah is his name. With blinding speed and power, he destroys the strong, crushing all their defenses. How you hate honest judges. How you despise people who tell you the truth. You trample the poor, stealing their grain through taxes and unfair rent. Therefore, though you build beautiful stone houses, you will never live in them. Though you plant lush vineyards, you will never drink wine from them. For I know the vast number of your sins and the depth of your rebellions. You oppress good people by taking bribes and deprive the poor of justice in the courts. So those who are smart keep their mouths shut, for it is an evil time. Do what is good and run from evil, so that you may live. Then just as Yahuwah, the God of heaven's armies, will be your helper. Let me go back to the beginning of this verse. Do what is good and run from evil so that you may live. Then Yahuwah, the God of heaven's armies, will be your helper, just as you have claimed. Hate evil and love what is good. Turn your courts into true halls of justice. Perhaps even yet Yahuwah, the God of heaven's armies, will have mercy on the remnant of his people. Therefore, this is what Yahuwah, the God of heaven's army, says. There will be crying in all the public squares and mourning in every street. Call for the farmers to weep with you and summon professional mourners to wail. There will be wailing in every vineyard, for I will destroy them all, says Yahuwah. The coming of judgment. The warning of coming judgment. What sorrow awaits you who say, if only the day of Yahuwah were here. You have no idea what you are wishing for. That day will bring darkness, not light. And that day, you will be like a man who runs from a lion only to meet a bear. Escaping from the bear, he leans his hand against the wall in his house, and he's bitten by a snake. Yes, the day of Yahuwah will be dark and hopeless, without a ray of joy or hope. I hate all of your show and pretense, the hypocrisy of your religious festivals and solemn assemblies. I will not accept your burnt offerings and grain offerings. I won't even notice all your choice peace offerings. Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice, an endless river of righteous living. Was it to me you were bringing sacrifices and offering during the 40 years in the wilderness, Israel? No. You served your pagan gods, Sarku, your king god, and Kiwan, your star god, the images you made for yourselves. So I will send you into exile to the land east of Damascus, says Yahuwah, whose name is the God of heaven's armies. Mom, shalom, shalom. Next chapter, y'all, Amos chapter 6. What sorrow awaits you who lounge in luxury in Jerusalem, and you who feel secure in Samaria. You are famous and popular in Israel, and people go to you for help. But go over to Calneh and see what happened there. Then go to the great city of Hamath and down to the Philistine city of Gath. You are no better than they are, and look how they were destroyed. You push away every thought of coming disaster, but your actions only bring the day of judgment closer. How terrible for you who sprawl on ivory beds and lounge on your couches, eating meat of the tender lambs of the flock and of choice calves fattened in the stall. You sing trivial songs to the sound of the harp and fancy yourselves to be great musicians like David. You drink wine by the bowlful and perfume yourselves with fragrant lotions. Therefore, and perfume yourselves with fragrant lotions. You care nothing about the ruin of your nation. Therefore, you will be the first to be led away as captives. Suddenly, all your parties will end. The sovereign Lord has sworn by his own name that this is what he, the Lord God of heaven's army, says. I despise the arrogance of Israel, and I hate their fortresses. I will give this city and everything in it to their enemies. If there are 10 men left in one house, they will all die. And when a relative who is responsible to dispose of the dead goes into the house to carry out the bodies, he will ask the last survivor, is anyone else with you? When the person begins to swear, no, by, he will interrupt and say, stop. Don't even mention the name of Yahuwah. When Yahuwah gives the command, homes both great and small will be smashed to pieces. Can horses gallop over boulders? Can oxen be used to plow them? But that's how foolish you are when you turn justice into poison and the sweet fruit of righteousness into bitterness, and you brag about your conquest of Lodabar. You boast, didn't we take Karnaim by our own strength? O people of Israel, I am about to bring an enemy nation against you, says Yahuwah, the God of heaven's armies. They will oppress you throughout your land, from Lebo Hamath in the north to the Araba Valley in the south. Last chapter for today, Amos chapter 7, a vision of locusts. The sovereign Lord showed me a vision. I saw him preparing to send a vast swarm of locusts over the land. This was after the king's share had been harvested from the fields and as the main crop was coming up. In my vision, the locusts ate every green plant in sight. Then I said, O sovereign Lord, please forgive us or we will not survive, for Israel is so small. So Yahuwah relented from his plan. I will not do it, he said. A vision of fire. Then the sovereign Lord showed me another vision. I saw him preparing to punish his people with a great fire. The fire had burned up the depths of the sea and was devouring the entire land. Then I said, O sovereign Lord, please stop, or we will not survive, for Israel is so small. Then Yahuwah relented from this plan too. I will not do that either, says the sovereign Lord. A vision of a plumb line. Then he showed me another vision, and I saw Yahuwah standing beside a wall that had been built using a plumb line. He was using a plumb line to see if it was still straight. Then Yahuwah said to me, Amos, what do you see? I answered, a plumb line. And then Yahuwah replied, I will test my people with this plumb line. I will no longer ignore all their sins. The pagan shrines of your ancestors will be ruined, and the temples of Israel will be destroyed. I will bring the dynasty of King Jeroboam to a sudden end. Amos and Amaziah. Then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent a message to Jeroboam, king of Israel. Amos is hatching a plot against you right here on your very doorstep. What he is saying is intolerable. He is saying Jeroboam will soon be killed and the people of Israel will be sent away into exile. Then Amaziah sent orders to Amos, get out of here, you prophet. Go on back to the land of Judah and earn your living by prophesying there. Don't bother us with your prophecies here in Bethel. Then this is the king's sanctuary. and the national place of worship. Okay. You say, don't prophesy against Israel. Stop preaching to my people. But this is what Yahuwah says. Your wife will become a prostitute in this city, and your sons and daughters will be killed. Your land will be divided up, and you yourself will die in a foreign land. And the people of Israel will certainly become captives in exile, far from their homeland. And that, my beautiful people, is our reading for today. Amos 5, 6, and 7. So let's go ahead and pick up. And Caesar's Messiah, Rod Shalom. Alicia, hey. All right, y'all. Chapter 4, the demons of Gadara. And this chapter is pretty long, so we may not finish the whole chapter. We have 15 minutes. We may, and then again, we may not. We start on page 69, and this ends... Yeah, we might not finish chapter 4 today. So we'll see. It ends on page 103. Yeah, I don't know that we can read 40 pages today. All right, 40-something pages. Okay, the demons of Gadara. When I first came across the passage from Wars of the Jews describing a son of Mary whose flesh was eaten and recognized its linkage to Christianity, I was perplexed. The more I studied the passage, the more I was convinced that it had been deliberately created as a lampoon, but as more than just a lampoon of Jesus. It appeared to be a disclosure of a different origin of Christianity than the one that had been passed down to the modern era. That is, that Christianity had been created to be a calamity upon the Jews. I began to analyze Wars of the Jews to determine if it contained other passages that could be seen as satirical disclosures regarding this different version of Christianity's origin. That was when it became clear to me that there were numerous parallels between the storyline of Jesus' ministry and Titus's campaign through Judea, and that among them was their similar experience near the town of Gadara. Each of the synoptic gospels tells a story of Jesus coming to Gadara, where he meets a man who was possessed by demons in Matthew. He is possessed by demons. In Matthew, Jesus meets two demon-possessed men, a point I shall return to. In the versions of the story found in Mark and Luke, when Jesus asks the demon his name, the demon replies, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Mark chapter 5, verse 9. I found it interesting that the demon would choose to describe himself and his cohort as a component of an army, remembering that the location where Jesus asked his disciples to become fishers of men was used to create a periodic linkage to an event that occurred at the same location in Wars of the Jews. I wonder whether the use of the word legion by the demon might be satirically related to an event in the Wars of the Jews that occurred near Gadara. The passage in Mark describing the demoniac of Gadara tells of Jesus' encounter with a man possessed by numerous demons. These demons leave the man at Jesus' bidding and then enter into a herd of swine. Once the swine are possessed by the demons, they rush wildly into the sea and drown. The passage does not reveal what happened to the demons after the swine drowned. Note that in the New Testament, unclean spirits are synonymous with devils and demons. Quote, "And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. And always, day and night, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. I should have did the voice right there. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave. And the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000, and were choked in the sea. And they that fed the swine fled, and told it in the city and in the country. And they went outside to see what it was that was done. And they came to Jesus, and see him that was possessed with a devil, and had the legion, sitting and clothed, and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And he departed and began to publish in the Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all the men did marvel. And that's in Luke. He said it up here, but he gives a reference 58. Who is that? No, I'm sorry. This is Mark. It's in Mark chapter 5, y'all. All them verses. Okay. But the reference for this is in 58. It gives you the exact reference for this passage. In Wars of the Jews 4 and 7, there is a short chapter that describes the battle at Gadara. The chapter begins with a description of how John rose to power as a leader of the rebellion. Quote, By this time, John was beginning to tyrannize. Okay. By this time, John was beginning to tyrannize. Now some submitted to him out of their fear of him, and others out of their goodwill to him. For he was a shrewd man to entice men to him, both by deluding them and putting cheats upon them. Nay, many there were that thought they should be safer themselves if the causes of their past insolent actions should now be reduced to one head, and not to a great many. End quote. Thus Josephus described John as a tyrant, into whose one head the insolent actions of many had been reduced. Josephus next describes the Sicarii, the most militant faction of the Jewish rebellion, who, he states, were able to undertake greater matters because of the sedition and tyranny that John had created. Quote, There was a fortress of very great strength not far from Jerusalem called Masada. Those that were called Sicarii had taken possession of it formerly, but at this time they overran the neighboring countries, aiming only to produce to themselves necessaries, for the fear they were then in prevented their further ravages. But when once they were informed that the Roman army lay still, and that the Jews were divided between sedition and tyranny, they boldly undertook greater matters. Now, as it is in a human body, if the principal part be inflamed, all the members are subject to the same distemper. So, by means of the sedition and disorder that was in the metropolis, had the wicked men that were in the country opportunity to ravage the same. Accordingly, when every one of them had plundered their own villages, they then retired into the desert. Yet were these men that now got together and joined in the conspiracy by parties too small for an army, and too many for a gang of thieves. End quote. Then Josephus describes the beginning of Vespasian's pacification of the Judean countryside. His first assault was on Gadara, a city held by the rebels. Quote, "These things were told Vespasian by the deserters. Accordingly, he marched against Gadara, the metropolis of Pera, which was a place of strength, and entered that city on the 4th day of the month, Distress, or it's also called Adar. For the men of power had sent an embassage to him without the knowledge of the seditious to treat about a surrender, which they did out of the desire they had of peace, and for saving their effects, because many of the citizens of Gadara were rich men. This embassy, the opposite party knew nothing of, but discovered it as Vespasian was approaching near the city. However, they despaired of keeping possession of the city, as being inferior in number to their enemies who were within the city, and seeing the Romans very near to the city, so they resolved to fly." End quote. Josephus then states that after being driven from Gadara, the rebels fled to another town where they conscripted a group of young men into their ranks. This combined group then ran like the wildest beasts, attempting to escape. Eventually, many were forced to leap into the Jordan River, where they drowned. So many dying in the river that it could not be passed over by reason of the dead bodies that were in. Quote, "But as soon as these fugitives saw the horsemen that pursued them just upon their backs, and before they came close to a fight, they ran together to a certain village, which was called Bethenebris, where finding a great multitude of young men, and arming them partly by their own consent, partly by force, they rashly and suddenly assaulted Placidus and the troops that were with him. These horsemen at the first onset gave way a little, as contriving to entice them further off the wall, and when they had drawn them into a place fit for their purpose, they made their horses encompass them round, and threw darts at them. So the horsemen cut off the flights of the fugitives, while the foot terribly destroyed those that fought against them. For those Jews did no more than show their courage. And then were destroyed. For as they fell upon the Romans, they were joined close together, and, as it were, walled about with their entire armor. They were not able to find any place where the darts could enter, nor were they able in any way to break their ranks, while they were themselves run through by the Roman darts, and like the wildest of wild beasts, rushed upon the points of the other swords. So some of them were destroyed, as cut with their enemies' swords upon their faces, and others were dispersed by the horsemen. So the Sicarii was trying to fight against the Roman soldiers, but their armor was so flawless that they couldn't find any kind of opening where to pierce them. But the Judah's army, or the Sicarii, their armor wasn't as tight and put together like they had, right? Where when Rome was rushing against them, they were able to cut their faces up, the darts piercing through their armor and everything, right? So that's how they won. That's how they beat them out here, right? So, and although the Sicarii was fighting back, they really couldn't find a way to pierce their armor in order to do any real damage, right? Remember, because they was on the run, right? So they was on the run. They fled from the country that they wanted to overtake, the town of Gadara, right? And remember, they didn't really want to destroy Gadara. Rome wanted to take it over because they found out that it was some very wealthy people that lived inside of there, which is just said, right? So when they came, the men fled, and they fled into the next town, gathering more soldiers with them. Some joined willingly, some they had to force to join them to stand against Rome, but even still that didn't help, right? All right. As for those that ran out of the village, they stirred up such as were in the country, and exaggerating their own calamities, and telling them that the whole army of the Romans were upon them, they put them into great fear on every side, so that they got in great numbers together and fled to Jericho. But Placidus slew all that overtook him as far as Jordan, and when he had driven the whole multitude to the riverside, he put his soldiers in array over against them. At which fight, hand to hand, 15,000 of them were slain, while the number of those that were unwillingly forced to leap into the Jordan was prodigious. There were besides 2,200 taken prisoners. A mighty prey was taken also, consisting of asses and sheep and camels and oxen. And Jordan could not be passed over by reason of the dead bodies that were in it. And this is reference 59. You can find a full reference in the back. Okay, and those who couldn't fight against them and they just backed them up to the river, they all just jumped, right? They would rather die by the river than die by the hands of the Romans. As I compared Josephus's and the New Testament's Gadara stories, I recognized that there were similarities between them. For example, the demoniac in the New Testament story is described as having a legion of demons inside him. The rebel tyrant John is described as having the past insolent actions of the many reduced to his one head. Thus, the demoniac of Gadara can be likened to Josephus's description of John. Further, Josephus indicates that the Sicarii were only able to become a Judah-wide movement because of John's efforts to establish himself as a tyrant. Before John's wickedness, they engaged in limited activities. At this time, they overran the neighboring countries, aiming only to produce to themselves necessaries for fear they were then in prevented. Hold on. For they fear they were in. I keep saying in. For the fear they were then in prevented their further ravages. However, once John had divided the country between sedition and tyranny, they boldly undertook greater matters. These greater matters being recruitment and expansion of their movement throughout the countryside and Jerusalem. Nor was there now any part of Judea that was not in a miserable condition, as well as its most eminent city also. So, like the demons that sprang forth out of one man at Gadara, the expansion of the Sicarii can be said to have come about as a result of the wickedness inside of one head. In another passage, in Wars of the Jews, Josephus repeats the concept of John, like the demoniac of Gadara, filling the entire country with 10,000 instances of wickedness. Quote, Yet did John demonstrate by his actions that these Sicarii were more moderate than he was himself. For he not only slew all such as gave him good counsel to do what was right, but treated them worst of all, as the most bitter enemies that he had among all the citizens. Nay, he filled his entire country with 10,000 instances of wickedness. End quote. And that's reference 60. I also noticed that in describing the Sicarii, Josephus stated that their group was too small for an army and too many for a gang of thieves. There is a word that describes just such a number of fighting men, a legion. Legion being the word that the demons from the New Testament passage above used to describe themselves. In Josephus' story of Gadara, this legion then, quote, ran together to a certain village, which was called Bethenebris, where finding a great multitude of young men, armed them partly by their own consent, partly by force. End quote. Thus, this legion of Sicarii infected a great number paralleling the demon's infection of the swine in the New Testament. The infected group is then confronted by the Romans and runs about like the wildest of beasts, which parallels to the herd of swine in the New Testament passage, who ran violently. Both the New Testament and Josephus conclude their Gadara stories with a mass drowning and a description of a group that numbered about 2,000. In the New Testament, as I have stated, the author does not tell us what happened to the demons that infected the swine. He does, however, tell us the number of swine that drowned, about 2,000. In the Gadara passage in the Wars of the Jews, Josephus tells us that the number of prisoners taken captive, there were, quote, there were besides 2,200 taken prisoners, end quote. Josephus also informs us that, quote, a mighty prey was taken also, consisting of asses and sheep and camels and oxen, end quote. Notice that there were no swine taken. I question whether the similarities between the two passages were the result of random chance. Many concepts could have been seen as parallel: one head that contained great evil and a legion, this legion infecting another group, that combined group running wildly, and the drowning of the infected group, a group that numbered about 2,000, and the missing swine, and of course the location of Gadara. However, if the parallels between the two passages had been created intentionally, what was their purpose? As I studied the New Testament passage further, I became aware that there were many unanswered questions within it. Why do the demons wish to enter the swine? Why do the swine then rush into the sea? What becomes of the demons? Why do the demons ask Jesus if he is there to torment them before the time? Why does the possessed man cut himself with stones? As I believe that Josephus's son of Mary, whose flesh is eaten passage, was a satire of the New Testament's symbolic Passover lamb, I attempted to determine whether one of the passages concerning Gadara might be a satire of the other. I soon realized that it is possible to read the gospel stories of the demoniac of Gadara as a satire of Josephus's description of the battle of Gadara, and that the two passages could possibly be interactive. The reason that the New Testament's demoniac of Gadara can be seen as a satire on Josephus's tyrant John, and that the battle of Gadara is simply because the two stories follow the same plot outline. In other words, the characters and events that can be seen as parallel occur in the same sequence, and it all occurs near Gadara. The satirical version in the New Testament tells the same story that Josephus does, but as is often the case with satire, the characters have different names. In the New Testament, these characters are the unnamed demoniac, the demons, and the swine that the demons infect. In Wars of the Jews, the characters are the rebel leader John, the Sicarii, and the group that the Sicarii conscripts. If the New Testament's Gadara passage is a satire of Josephus's description of the battle, the demon-possessed man in the New Testament from whom the legion sprang would be a satire of John, the rebel leader from whose one head the wickedness came forth. Following this logic, the legion of demons that sprang forth from one individual in the New Testament would lampoon the Sicarii in Wars of the Jews, who are described as too small for an army, or I should have said, quote, who are described as, quote, too small for an army and too many for a gang of thieves, end quote. The swine in the New Testament would satirize the group that the Sicarii infected in Josephus's passage. The premise that the characters in the two tales concerning Gadara are meant to be understood as the same individuals but with different names also seems to answer my question about whether the 2,000 demons drowned with the swine the premise that the characters in the two tales concerning Gadara are meant to be understood as the same individuals but with different names also seems to answer my question about whether the 2,000 demons drowned with the swine they were infected. The demons who infected the swine in the New Testament must be a satirical representation of the 2,200 Sakari who escaped drowning and who were captured alive at Gadara. Josephus appears to complete this comical interaction with the New Testament by pointing out that while many different animals were captured, none were swine. A mighty prey was taken also, consisting of asses and sheep and camels and oxen. End quote. Why were no swine captured? Because in the New Testament story of Gadara, the swine had drowned and therefore could not be captured in the parallel passage in Wars of the Jews. While the structure of this satire is more complex than the others I have shown, the dark humor itself is very straightforward. It simply denigrates the Sakari as demons and unclean spirits and the people they recruited as swine. No doubt this was the way the Flavian family felt about the rebels. And I was about to bring that back up because remember, if we remember from the beginning, how they felt about the Hebrews, or they called the sect from Judah the Jews, right? They called us the devil. They called us demons, right? Just like it's kind of like reverse today, and you have our people now calling other races devils and demons. This is what they were doing to us, right? And that's how they looked at us. So when they described us, they called us demons and devils, right? No doubt this was the way the Flavian family felt about the rebels. Many of Jesus' prophecies have been long understood to foresee events from the war between the Romans and the Jews. It is therefore strange that the relationship between the two passages has not been noticed before. The Gospels, Gadara story being a prophecy of an event from the war that Josephus recorded as having come to pass. This oversight is particularly odd in light of the fact that the Gospel's Gadara story is, in and of itself, incoherent. Within the context of the New Testament, there is no theological or moral principle that can be gleaned from the story of a legion of demons that enter a herd of swine that then run wildly into the river and drown. However, when it is viewed as a satire of Josephus' description of the Battle of Gadara, the New Testament passage makes perfect sense. Another seemingly incoherent aspect of Jesus' encounter with the demoniac that this interpretation makes clear occurs in the version of the story found in Matthew, wherein, upon seeing Jesus, the demon-possessed men cry out, "What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" End quote. The question the demons are asking is unanswerable within the literal context of the passage. What time are they referring to? However, this question is answered by the interpretation I offer. If the demons are lampoons of the leaders of the Jewish rebellion, the time of their torment is clear. They are prophesying the torment experienced by John and Simon at the end of their war against the Romans. Further, if the New Testament's passage is a satire of the Battle of Gadara, notice that it is a specific satire of Josephus' passage and not of some tradition regarding the battle that Josephus might have shared with the authors of the New Testament. For example, the demoniac referring to himself as Legion only makes satirical sense as a witty parallel to Josephus' unique description of the rebel band as being, quote, too small for an army and too many for a gang of thieves, end quote. This is an important point in that it indicates that parts of the New Testament and Wars of the Jews were designed to be read interactively or intertextually. Because remember, when Wars of the Jews first came out and they wrote the New Testament, They actually had them together so you could read them together. You would see the satire found in the New Testament. Just like, this is kind of like people who put together, I guess, any type of thing, but like the Marvel movies, right? You can watch one Marvel movie like you can watch Captain America, and then you can go watch something like Endgame. But if you go, actually, Endgame brings all the characters together. So if you watch different heroes, like all the different ones that Marvel does, they have different movies or different comics and stuff. Then they actually bring them together. So you see some things going on in some of the Marvel movies, even like Guardians of the Galaxy, and some things are not quite understandable until they release another one, and then they kind of intertwine. It's like, oh, so that's what happened. Oh, he was there the whole time. He was actually seeing the future of this. He was thinking ahead. Like, it brings it all together. That's how Josephus' mind was working when he did this, right? That's why when Wars of the Jews came out and New Testament came out, they should have been read, and they were together until they split them up, right? And back then, everybody knew that the New Testament was a parody of actual events that were recorded in the Wars of the Jews, right? But when you separate them, you get people all discombobulated. Now you got people out here looking like idiots. I myself was included in that idiot group because we was taken by the satire portion of these works, and we didn't have the Wars of the Jews, right? I mean, it was there, but we didn't know about it. Nobody ever mentioned Wars of the Jews in church to us. Otherwise, I would have probably went looking for it, right? And I would have been in church. Excuse me, Pastor. So you remember that book you had mentioned, Wars of the Jews? Look, I was reading this, and then something sounds fishy to me, because you know how you read us that passage from the New Testament last week about the Legion of Demons, right? You know what? There was a war in the Wars of the Jews over here in Gadara too to talk about the same thing, and I see some striking similarities between the two books. I think we need to talk about this, right? We would have been came across and uncovered this farce had we just even heard names of other books, right? Because you would have had some little nerd in the church taking notes of all the books you mentioned and go back looking for these books and start reading them, right? For somebody, I would have bought a split in between the church asking these questions. But wait a minute, we just want to. Have you read it, Pastor? You know, like, seriously. And if you read it, why is you teaching us this without this? You see what I'm saying? Then we would all, okay, shoot, stop all that foolishness right there, because this was a satire. They was making fun of us. You're like, you see what I'm saying? Look. This is an important point in that it indicates that parts of the New Testament and Wars of the Jews were designed to be read interactively or intertextually. Josephus' description of the manner in which John had spread his infection is similar to Jewish description of the unclean spirits who left one man and infected many others. Quote, now as this is in a human body, if the principal part be inflamed, all the members are subject to the same distemper. End quote. This similarity is especially clear when one considers that in the first century Judea, demons were considered to be responsible for fevers and other illnesses. The Dead Sea Scrolls actually describe a fever demon. When Josephus uses infection as an analogy for the Sicaries' activity, he is practically likening them to demons. I therefore decided to review the New Testament and Wars of the Jews for examples. I therefore decided to review the New Testament and Wars of the Jews for examples to support the premise that the New Testament lampoons the Sicarii as demons. During this analysis, it became clear that Jesus and Josephus each referred to the same wicked generation, the generation that crucified Christ and then rebelled against Rome, as having been infected by demons. In the following passage, for example, Jesus specifically foresees that unclean spirits or demons would possess this wicked generation. Notice that Jesus makes the point that one unclean spirit can affect many, which parallels Josephus' description of the wickedness passing from one head to many. Jesus also states that the unclean spirits pass through waterless places, which can be seen as a satirical way of stating that demons cannot pass through water, thereby linking the passage to what puzzled me regarding the fate of the 2,000 demons. The idea that demons are unable to pass through waters runs through both the New Testament and the works of Josephus. Quote, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a man, he passes through waterless places, seeking rest, but he finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came, and when he comes and finds it empty, swept and put it, and when he comes, he finds it empty, swept and put in order. Then he goes and brings with him 7 other spirits more evil than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of the man becomes worse than the first. So shall it be with this evil generation, end quote. And that's reference 64, which gives the passage of scripture in the index. Jesus linking the evil generation to demonically possessed men who infected others mirrors my interpretation of the New Testament's Gadara's passage, wherein I concluded that the Sakari were demons who had infected others with their wickedness. When Jesus referred to a wicked generation, he appears to have been referring to the Sakari who rebelled against Rome. And remember, the Sakari, as they're calling the Sakari wicked, you're welcome, Jerry. They're not wicked like what we would think wicked is now. They call it the Sakari, or this sect of Jews or Hebrews. They called them wicked because they wouldn't submit to Romans' evil rule. Remember, they were living by Torah, right? And although they had shenanigans going on doing what they did, they said, we know we be acting a fool, but we ain't following your rule. We serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So even though with their shenanigans, because we know they weren't sinless. They was committing all kinds of sins. But when it came to defecting or to submitting to Rome, they said absolutely not. We will not. And that's why they were constantly at war with Rome. And that's why they called the Sakari and Hebrews demons, right? Because they called them the wicked generation because they wouldn't submit to their wicked rule, right? Okay. Jesus, hold on, let me go back up. Jesus' linking of the evil generation to demonically possessed men who infected others mirrors my interpretation of the New Testament's Gadara passage, wherein I concluded that the Sakari were demons who infected others with their wickedness. When Jesus referred to a wicked generation, he appears to have been referring to the Sakari who rebelled against Rome. This proposition is especially clear in light of the fact to the Jews of this era, a generation was 40 years, which was the exact time span between Jesus' resurrection and the final destruction of the Sakari at Masada. The understanding that a generation lasted 40 years comes from the Pentateuch. And, quote, and the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all this generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord were consumed, end quote. And that's reference 65. Many Christians currently hold a different position regarding Jesus' doomsday prophecies, believing that they do not refer to the generation of Jews that lived during his lifetime. Instead, they believe that Jesus was speaking about some unspecified time still in the future. I feel that this futurist understanding is incorrect and has the effect of obfuscating Jesus' words, thereby making it difficult to understand the meaning they convey in the first century. No real understanding of the New Testament is possible without knowing what Jesus meant when he used the word generation. The Greek word in the New Testament that has been translated as generation is gena. Early in the 20th century, some Christian scholars began to posit that Jesus' use of the word was meant to indicate not the generation of Jews alive during his lifetime, but rather an entire race of Jews which would not pass away without all these things having first taken place. And we still know that that particular understanding is what is still running rampant throughout the church now, right? Which is why people constantly sitting and waiting for Jesus to return to come save them from Rome's rule, this wicked rule, right? And it keeps them, it does exactly what it was designed to do, to keep them immobile and doing nothing with their lives, to fight back against the wicked Roman rule that has now taken over pretty much all the world, right? The people who could do something rise up and not overthrow, but overthrow these positions and have righteous people begin to build and fill these places. They got them off in a la land, being busy with religion and religion's fallacies and fables and story tales and children's stories. And they just keep them out. Just get them something to do while we build our wicked kingdom, right? Just get them something to do. Put them over there. They ain't gonna mess with nobody. We subdue them by peace and let them have services within their four walls and going making other disciples to do the same stuff so they can leave us alone while we can get about ruling this entire earth, right? May Yahuwah forgive us all for falling into the fallacy of religion, right? And keep you dumb and doing nothing with your life. Going to the grave, still waiting for Jesus to come get your tail. The Greek, I'm gonna go back up. I know somebody gonna unsubscribe me for that comment. I don't care though. The Greek word in the New Testament that has been translated as generation is Gina. Early in the 20th century, some Christian scholars began to posit that Jesus' use of this word was meant to indicate not the generation of Jews alive during this lifetime, but rather the entire race of Jews which will not pass away without all these things having first taken place. It is easy to understand their desire for such a definition. If Jesus is referring to the Jews alive during his lifetime, then his second coming must have occurred in 70 AD. Such an understanding leaves Christianity in an awkward position. This is because if Jesus' second coming had occurred during the war between the Romans and the Jews, why was it Titus and not Jesus who demolished the temple and destroyed the wicked generation? The Christian theologian C.I. Scofield recognized this dilemma, and in his Bible reference switched the definition of the word Gina to that of genos, an entirely different word meaning race. However, scholars showed that the New Testament's use of Gina could only be referring to the Jews of Jesus' lifetime and not to the entire Jewish race, thereby debunking Scofield's position. Reference 66 in the back. The understanding that Jesus was specifically referring to the generation of Jews alive at that time he spoke the words was certainly the understanding held during the Middle Ages. For example, the following notes were found written alongside Matthew 24:34 in a Bible dated 1599. Ooh, look. Oh my goodness. I'm glad they said 1599. I shared something. I'm going to keep my spot right here, right? You know, there was a Bible in 1599 called the Geneva version. Ooh, y'all, I be finding out so much stuff as I go through my little travels through this deep rabbit hole, right? I'm telling you, y'all got to come down here. It's really deep, right? I still got so many rabbit holes that I can see ahead of me that I got to look at. The rabbit hole gets deep, right? Look. Okay, so y'all might notice it, especially if you've been on my Facebook page, right? So in 1599, there was a Bible published called the Geneva version. Since then, of course, clearly they done banned the Geneva version. Although you can find copies of it now, which is good, we can find it so we can go back and look at some of this stuff, right? So in the 1599 Geneva version, which, i.e. King James, he banned in 1611 and called it seditious, right? Because they done started a whole nother thing with the King James version, right? So King James said, get rid of the Geneva version. There were people killed because of the Geneva version, right? And I'm going to tell you why. Even if it was just for one word that was still being used, that was an identifying marker of certain people, right? Because when I came across it, I was like, holy crap, wait a minute. That makes me now begins to answer a question that I've had for years. Where is America found at in all the freaking Bible, right? Because when you go through and they change terms, it was one term that they changed. One group of people's name that they changed, which now the word that they use now, it makes us only think about the continent of Africa. That word is Ethiopia. That wasn't the original word that is found in the Geneva version and previous versions of the Bible. You know what that word was before they changed it to Ethiopian? Anybody know? Anybody that ain't looked at my page and saw it? You know, I'll let somebody answer that. I just give you like 10 seconds. Anybody know what the word Ethiopia replaced, or Ethiopians? What they called the people who is now in your Bible today is called Ethiopians. You know what they called them? Because it would tell you, wait a minute. And we know that they were all over the world too. And they were wealthy. And they ruled. They had kingdoms. You hear them talking about them now. Some people getting in trouble. They like, shut your mouth, right? There's a video. I'm going to see if I can find. He all wildly and stuff. Hold on. Let me see. I'm going to show it to y'all. I mean, he looked like he straight out the hood. But the police ain't messing with him because they understood something about this group of people, which they try and keep on the hush-hush. They round here. Nobody. The word that Ethiopia or Ethiopian replaced was Black Moor, right? Now, if you go through your Bible and you remove the word Ethiopia and you put back Moor, the Moor, M-O-O-R, go through all the Bible and do that, then you realize who Abraham was married to. He's married to an Ethiopian woman. Put the right word there. He's married to a Moorish woman. Go through here and read all this. When you begin to hear the word Moorish, it begins to wake you up another level. Wait a minute. Who were the Moors? Look and see who the Moors were, right? Now, you got to kind of be careful on some of the Google references that pop up. You do a lot better Googling more on YouTube because you actually have some Moors that will tell you who they are, right? And how their kingdom was subdued by Rome, right? And guess what? Moors are black too, right? But they're going to tell you who they are. And I ain't going to say they vicious, but the Moors don't play, which is why I hope I can find this video. I hope I can find it because it was a Moor in Philadelphia. The cops, well, cops look at you black, all black people the same or whatever, right? Forgive me, I didn't mean to offend nobody. If that offended you, I'm trying to just explain this, right? But he had he had one of his flags. They were harassing him until he went off on them, right? It looked like all the police, and you will see it because people from the street were recording. They was like, wait a minute, what's going on? Oh, they ain't touching him. What he's saying must be true. Dude was going off, and the cops was kind of just standing by. Call your supervisor. Call your chief. Y'all better not. Y'all know better. You must be new. You don't know who we are, right? I'm like, what? And I seen this video a few years ago, and it kind of, I didn't understand. I'm like, well, who is this guy really? He hauled him out here more, and this is his land, and they are trespassing. They have no jurisdiction over him. I'm like, okay. It was baffling to me then. It was more baffling for one, dang, shoot him, it was blood, and it wasn't blood and guts everywhere, but a big black man hollering and screaming, making all kinds of sudden movements, right? You think about making a sudden movement, you dead. You black, you dead. You don't get a chance to make a sudden movement. But I watched the entire video in absolute, suspense, oh my gosh, somebody's trigger finger's gonna slip, because it's always somebody, oops, I didn't mean to shoot. And a 14-year-old black boy has been murdered in the street. The cop, I didn't mean to shoot. I said, well, why did you shoot? I don't know why you shoot. None of this was happening at this point. I'm like, okay, none of these scenarios is happening with this dude. And he's talking about, I'm a black mom, I'm a Moor. You ain't gonna do nothing. Call your chief down here. I'm like, what? what is going on? So I'm still kind of learning about this, but it was like the entire police force and all of Philadelphia was down there. Some of y'all may have seen this video. You could see because the people who recorded, it's like all these cops here, which hyped up the black people that was around. Yeah, y'all, MFers, get out of here. Y'all better not touch him. And some people like, well, what's going on? Why ain't he shot yet? Right? And some people like, man, you need to calm down before they shoot you. But ain't none of them had their hands on their guns. Their hands was to their side. Yeah, you better pick up that mic and call your supervisor, call your chief, call the deputy chief. Deputy chief call the commissioner. All this, I'm like, what is happening here? And look, not that I wanted to see him get shot, but I was completely baffled about why none of the cops' fingers had slipped. Why it wasn't like a oops, like all of this. And and the sudden movements, hands movement, reaching into his vehicle. And mind you, he didn't go get a gun. He was like, reach. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to kill him for sure. Going into his glove box, hollering and screaming. Oh, and then he go to reach down. I'm thinking, oh, but he pulls out a flag and hang it, like all these sudden movements and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? But he was a Moor. And apparently, Philly, they know that. Well, the cop who pulled him over apparently was wet behind the ears and didn't understand about the Moorish people all over the earth, right? And I'm just like, this is interesting, right? So, but I'm gonna share the video. I'm gonna try and find out. Oh my gosh, I hope I can find it. But I'm gonna find it and you'll see what I'm talking about. And you may have seen it and you may not. But if anybody understands the plight of black people, although not all black people are Moorish people or descendants of the Moors, if you look like a Negro, you just get shot, right? It's horrible. It's horrible. That's kind of stereotyping. It is. But everybody, we're not dumb to this. We kind of understand this. But you will see what I'm talking about when you watch this video, right? And I brought that up to tell you what happens when you start messing with terms, right? And you replace them with terms, because Moors, we know, they everywhere, right? They're in Africa. They're not just in Africa, but more so here in the Americas, right? And it by them removing the Moorish term, it removes the identifying key factor of certain people who were present at this time, right? And so now the only time we hear Ethiopia or Ethiopian is now specifically pinpointed to Africa. So it wakes nobody up by using the word Ethiopia. Or Moses was his brother and sister getting married because he didn't marry a Ethiopian woman, right? No, he married a Moorish woman. Listen, okay, so when it said 1599, it triggered the Geneva Bible. And I will, look, I'm going to put although I can't yet, let me see, scriptures from the Geneva Bible. And you'll find them in Jeremiah, anywhere you go through, right? But I'm going to specifically pull out verses that I found in the Geneva version that actually keeps Moor and Black Moor inside of there so you can see. And you can now find it online. So get in there and go look it up yourself, right? It's a King James Version, 1599. No, not King James Version. It's the 1599 Geneva Version. Remember, the King James Version in 1611 is when he released his. After they got done scrubbing, removing terms, and banned the Geneva Version, and he dared anybody to keep pushing it, they lost their life, right? Because they're further not just hiding Israel, but they're hiding other nations. Because once you begin to see other nations, actual nations who we can clearly see still exist today, it brings light to the other nations. And the Moors helped Israel. Matter of fact, remember the guy we read in Jeremiah not too long ago. Remember the guy, it said the Ethiopian guy who helped Jeremiah. Remember they dropped Jeremiah down into the pit, into the cistern? The one who let down the rags, he said, put these rags under your arms. That was a Moor. And he went to his Moorish king to let them know that they didn't drop Jeremiah, the Israelite, the prophet, down in the hole. He said, go get him, right? They stood with Israel. Some of them, they kind of fought, but for the most part, the Moors stood with Israel, and they had relationship in the governments. They had their own governments, right? And they were very aware of who the Israelite prophets were. They were the ones who went and rescued Jeremiah out of the cistern, right? Y'all, this rabbit hole, come on down here with me. Bring your flashlights with you. Backup batteries. We need all the help we can get down here. Listen. All right, look. Okay, I done got all sidetracked with this Bible dated 1599. I had to share it. I'm gonna share that stuff with you. So be looking for it. Be looking for it. I'm gonna pin it in the comment section. I'll put it in the description box, y'all. Look. Okay. For example, let me go back. The understanding that Jesus was specifically referring to the generation of Jews alive at the time he spoke the words was certainly the understanding held during the Middle Ages. For example, the following notes were found written alongside Matthew 24:34 in a Bible dated 1599. Quote, "This age, the word generation or age is here being used for the men of this age." End quote. Reference 67. We are on solid ground in understanding that Jesus was referring solely to the generation of Jews who were alive during the 40 years between his ministry and the destruction of Jerusalem. However, if this is correct, then Jesus and Josephus were referring to the same group as wicked generation. Notice in the following passage how similar Jesus and Josephus' understanding was regarding demons, the wicked generation, and the Sakari. From Josephus, quote, "Had the Romans made any longer delay in coming against these villains, the city would either have been swallowed up by the ground opening upon them, or been overflowed by water, or else been destroyed by such thunder as the country of Sodom perished by, for it had brought forth a generation of men much more ascetical than were those that suffered such. And truly so, it happened that though the slayers left off at the evening, yet did fire greatly prevail in the night, and as all was burning, came the 8th day of the month Gorpius, which is Elul, upon Jerusalem, a city that had been liable to so many miseries during this siege, that it had always enjoyed as much happiness from its first foundation. It would certainly have been the envy of the world, nor did it on any other account so much deserve these sore misfortunes as by producing such a generation of men as were the occasions of its overthrow." That's reference 69. Now from the New Testament, quote, "Wicked and faithless generation," he replied, "they clamor for a sign, but none shall be given them except the sign of the prophet Jonah." Matthew 12:39. Then he goes and brings back with him 7 more other spirits more wicked than himself, and they come in and dwell there, and in the end that man's condition becomes worse than it was at first. So will it be also with the present wicked generation. Matthew 12, verse 45. "O unbelieving and perverse generation," replied Jesus, "how long shall I be with you? How long shall I endure you?" Matthew chapter 17, verse 16. "I tell you in solemn truth that all these things will come upon the present generation." Matthew 23:36. "I tell you in solemn truth that the present generation will certainly not pass away without all these things having first taken place." Matthew 24:34. Somehow, the three-way connection between the wicked generation, Jesus' demons, and Josephus' Sakari has not attracted much attention from scholars. For example, the Hebrew scholar Joseph Klausner completely missed the connection. He wrote, At the time, even educated people and those who had imbibed the Greek culture, such as Josephus, thought of such nerve cases and cases of insanity as cases of possession by some devil or evil or unclean spirit, and believed in cures and that certain men could perform miracles. That's reference 70. In fact, Josephus did not believe that demons were nerve cases and gave a precise definition as to what they were. he stated that demons were the spirits of the wicked. Demons, quote, demons are no other than the spirits of the wicked, end quote. That's reference 71. This definition indicates that Josephus saw the Zachari as demons and that he constantly describes the rebels as wicked. Josephus also links the Zachari with demons in another way. He describes the Zachari as moving with a demoniacal fury. Reference 72. As they went to kill their families at the end of the siege of Masada. Like Jesus, Josephus makes it clear who the wicked are. They are the generation of Jews that rebelled against Rome. Quote, that neither did any other city ever suffer such miseries, nor did any ever breed a generation more fruitful in wickedness than this was from the beginning of the world. Reference, end quote. And that's reference 73. Thus, Jesus and Josephus shared a narrow understanding and expressed it with the same vocabulary, that the generation of Jews who lived between 33 CE and 73 CE were wicked because they had been infected by a demonic spirit. This shared understanding is suspicious. Jesus could only view the wickedness of this generation by looking into the future, and yet he not only held the same opinion of the generation as Josephus, he used the same words describing it. Returning to the version of the story of the demoniac of Gadara found in Matthew, where Jesus meets two demons. In Wars of the Jews, we learn that there were two tyrants or leaders of the Jewish rebellion, John described above and a Simon. Since my analysis suggests that the New Testament is satirizing John in the version that describes a single demon of Gadara, it seemed logical to ask whether the version describing the two demoniacs was satirizing both leaders of the Jewish rebellion, John and Simon. And this is where we'll pause today. Right? So we'll pause right here on page 83. We started on what, 68? No, we started on 69. So we'll pause right here. And we'll pick it up tomorrow with experimenting with this premise. All right, y'all. Okay. All right, y'all. We might finish this tomorrow. Matter of fact, no, we might not finish it tomorrow because it's Monday. Oh, no. It's a holiday. So, and everybody off. Well, most people are off. So we might take the time tomorrow because it's like another weekend day. No, we won't. We won't be here Monday. So we won't finish it. Belay my last. We'll come back to it Tuesday. Sunday. We won't be here tomorrow. Tuesday. And we definitely not going to finish it Tuesday. So we'll finish chapter 4 by Wednesday. By the end, Wednesday. Then we'll go to chapter 5. Anyway, then we'll talk more about the Flavian signature. How we can see Josephus's signature writing and his styles and all his shenanigans all throughout the New Testament. Then we just talking about the New Testament, right? We ain't even gotten into the Quran, which he also wrote, right? But I digress. Y'all, thanks for hanging out with me today. It is Sunday, September the 5th, September the 5th, 2021, day 252 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets, and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 921. We read Amos 5, 6, and 7, and in Caesar's Messiah, we read chapter 4, pages 69 through page 82. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and do the blessing. And then shortly after this, I'm going to go ahead and pull these references up so you guys can look at some of this stuff. Start checking some of this stuff out, right? It's going to help wake you up. And it is going to help you see that I'm really not a heretic, right? I'm really not. I'm here to help wake y'all up, right? And it's not just our people who have been led astray. All the world has been led astray at this point, right? So whoever can see the truth, wake up, right? So I'm here to wake up my people and all those other people from other nations who listen, right? Quit being taken by religion and all the fallacies and all the craziness. All right, the blessing is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. Remember, the first 21 verses is the Nazarite vow. And Yahuwah said a man or a woman can take it, right? And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, Yahuwah will kneel before us, presenting gifts, and will guard us with a hedge of protection. Yahuwah will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards us, bringing order, and he will provide us with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yahuwah will lift up his wholeness of being and look upon us, and he will set in place all we need to be whole and complete. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. If you haven't been here before, when I explained this is a more accurate rendering of what the blessing is. But you are more familiar with these terms as we were reading it like it is in the King James Version for the last 3 years. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, Yahuwah bless us and keep us. Yahuwah make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Right? Okay, so the actual blessing, Yahuwah bless us and keep us, the accurate rendering of that, it is that that's kind of summing it up, but a more accurate, more intimate understanding of Yahuwah bless us and keep us is Yahuwah will kneel before us presenting gifts and will guard us with a hedge of protection. The next verse 25, Yahuwah makes his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us, is Yahuwah will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards us, bringing order, and he will provide us with love, sustenance, and friendship. Verse 26, where it says Yahuwah will lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace, Yahuwah will lift up his wholeness of being and look upon us, and he will set in place all we need to be whole and complete, right? So that's a proper understanding of that. When we understand it in that way, it's much more intimate for us now, right? And we love him for it. With that being said, beautiful people, we out of here. Baby girl got headphones on. She don't even hear me ending this, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. So we ain't got no shenanigans going on today, right? All right, so with that being said, I love y'all. I'm going to prepare this stuff for y'all in the next few minutes so y'all can go check out some of these resources. And if you got some, share with me. Share with me. I'm really interested, right? All right. So with that being said, I will see y'all back here Tuesday. We won't be here tomorrow. Tuesday, 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.